All right, so for our next session, our friends from EdgeTech, Boris Paunovic and Igor Djordjevic, are here to discuss how event analytics can turn messy, unstructured data into actionable insights. Whether you are working with diverse data sources or tackling complex correlations, this session will leave you with a better way to approach business intelligence. Won't it? It will. All right, please welcome them to the stage.
Thank you.
Here you are.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to our presentation. As we were already announced, we will talk about event analytics, moving data from unstructured to insightful. As you heard about us, we come from EdgeTech. Both of us are tech leads over there. I'm working as a data analyst and my colleague is working as a data engineer. So we will talk to you from our perspectives. Now to set the stage, we are not here to talk about the solution, rather about a solution. We are not here to talk about the process, rather about a process. And we are here to talk about the principle, our principle. So, what's our journey? We have pretty usual constellation of things. So we have ingestion of our data. There are many different sources. We ingest them into our system. Data comes in all shapes and sizes, the usual stuff. All of that data needs to be cleansed. So we do the usual janitorial work, as data engineers like to call it, and also some deep cleaning in some specific use cases. Then we move to augmentation. This is the part where, you bring in the data from social media, you bring in the data from the marketing platforms, from internal sources, external ones, open data, etc., to bring the data to the next level. As they say, what can be solved by data can be solved with more data. And now that everything is in place, we can create analytics. Here, it is of utmost importance that this analytics are pristine because they are going to our stakeholders. Everyone will need to read this and make decisions based on it. So, in this perfect world that we are, nothing can go wrong, can it? Well, to give you a bit of context, in this specific scenario, we're working with a client who has a subscription model. So, you know how subscriptions work. You have a subscription, someone subscribes, pays for your service, and generally speaking, you're happy. Then, eventually, the same person unsubscribes. Generally speaking, you're sad. Well, the thing that actually went wrong in this scenario was that someone decided to unsubscribe, or how we call it, hit that cancel button. What's the problem? That shouldn't be any problem at all. But they never subscribed in the first place. They just unsubscribed. And everything fell apart. Well, everything fell apart. The reports were inaccurate, some broke, and of course, I can go there and fix everything up. Make a few changes, and everything will work as usual. But I've done that before, and before, and before. I need a solution right now, some more robust solution. So let's do a sanity check. I first check the numbers to see whether all the calculations are actually good, whether I made some mistake. Everyone makes mistakes from time to time. But they seemed okay. So I decided to go to stakeholders and talk with them and see how they see this particular situation. I talked with customer success, asked them about that specific subscription, and they told me that they already sent them email, they're keeping in touch with them, and that they will definitely come back and resubscribe. Okay, that means that subscription actually exists. I talked with finance, and they told me that I need to be really careful about it, because at the end of the month, they will have cash flow report. This will show up as a negative revenue, and come on, we can't have negative revenue. Fix that. And finally, I talked with sales guys. They told me that everything is in Salesforce. I don't need to worry about it. Salesforce is accurate, and they have hit their sales goals, so we don't need to worry about anything. Having that whole context of how they feel about this whole situation and how they plan to work on it, I went to my dear friend and asked him, please help me.
I will, don't worry. So, as any good engineer, what would any good engineer do? Well, it would try to investigate the problem to see what's the cause. Boris did already his part. Now it's my time to do my part. And understanding the problem is really key to success if you want to build something more robust and with less errors at the end. So it's research time. That means that I'm going to ask what's happening, what do you see, what is expected to see, is it something that happens for the first time or it's occurring over time and again and again. So it really helps us make some conclusions. The main question we have, the main dilemma we have, is it something wrong with our data, with information we have stored in our system? That's perfectly reasonable. Or maybe there is something wrong with our code, with our SQLs, with ton of SQLs we have, with ton of logic we have. Maybe there is something wrong there. Is it easy to blame something for this? No, it's not. It's always, as you know, somewhere in between. So it's kind of both data and the code. On the data side, on one side, so we are collecting, so we're ingesting data from various different data sources. In this particular case, because we're talking about subscriptions, we're collecting information from various payment platforms and payment gateways. And as always, there are some tricky situations where users can migrate from one platform to another, maybe subscription stops, restarts, so there's a whole bunch of situations, and all the different platforms handle that differently. So that's one of the issues we have. On the other side, and also for the data, it's also important to know that over time, because the system is it exists for quite some time, it changed over time the way how the data is collected, but unfortunately not all of the data is available to repull again. That's also very realistic scenario, so there is no going back there. We must live with the data we already have. On the other side, the code had to address all of these scenarios. And over time, as we can easily say, it's a legacy code. It's code that's got patched over time that Boris already explained. So it was a kind of a messy and very fragile. So changing just a bit of it can crash and result in some other errors on some other side. So we had to be careful. And this is the right time where we decided, okay, it's time to draw the line. It's time to start things from scratch. What it means that we literally are back to the drawing board with a pen and paper. Okay, see, what do we have? What do we need? So let's talk about it. What do we have and what do we need? Data sources, I already mentioned, come in many different formats. Here are represented with pluses, minuses, and all other symbols. And it's the data we have. There is nothing we can change about. It's the raw data we have, and we must use it somehow. What is the goal? The goal is to create a data model that is a perfect fit for our business, for the way how we think about our products, the way how we already report stuff. So there are some constraints that we need to follow, because we cannot just start from there. The world doesn't start here. We need to fit into existing system. In the other words, we need to find a place for everything and have everything in its place. I know that sounds a bit more abstract, so let's try to be more practical and tell a story about our subscriptions, and as we call it, subscription model. So, subscription, you can imagine it as you go to the platform, you want to buy a product, you pick your product, you enter all the relevant information. That's the start of a subscription. That means that the start event is generated. And very important is to have a very precise information about date and time when this event occurred. Naturally, subscription has its life. It lives for some time until the end. So there is an end event. That means that subscription must finish at some point in time, and that end must always come after the start. That's purely logical, right? Well, I will tell you a bit more about this later. And this is a perfectly normal scenario, ideal scenario. You have a start and end. But it doesn't work that way. So there are a lot of things that can happen with the subscriptions, and that's absolutely according to our business. So in some cases, user may want to decide to pause. He decides, I don't want to pay for a subscription for a couple of months. Let's wait and see how does it really help my business, for example. Perfectly valid. Subscription is paused. That means that the money is not coming to our business. We must be aware of that. But still, we're keeping the user there with all his information, and he may decide to resume at some point. That's what we want. Yeah, okay. That's one possibility. User might be very interested in our product and wants to buy more of it to add to its subscription. That's something that we call upgrade. On the other hand, user might be unsatisfied with our product and platform, and he might want to reduce a bit the payment he's making and the service he's getting. So that's downgrade. Perfectly fine. And at some point, user might want to decide to cancel a subscription. So imagine as going to a Netflix. So this is no way near Netflix, just to be clear there. So it's a Netflix. Let's say it's a Netflix example. You cancel a subscription. You have a recurring payment every the first day of a month. And you decide to cancel on the 5th day of month. What happens? You cancel on the 5th day, but you still have your subscription active till the end of that billing term. That's perfectly fine. And you can maybe decide at some point during the month that you still want to be there and you want to revoke that cancel. That's something that we call rescind. Logical, right? And as you look at this diagram and all of those different stages that can subscription be in and different transitions, this is ideal scenario. So everything working as it should. Our platforms and sources are giving us the events in the right order. But the problem is that's not always the case. So imagine a scenario when the subscription started, user decided to pause, and then we see an upgrade. How it can be? How it can be possible to upgrade if something is paused? Well, it turned out that that platform is not aware of that, not handling that situation. It's not important for them. It's not telling us it's resumed because who knows why. So what we did with our, as we like to call it, a state machine. So we keep track of all the transitions between different states. We decided, okay, if there is an upgrade and pause, there must be something in between. So we introduced a concept of implicit events. So something must happen in between. Why we did that? We want to be fully consistent with all the subscriptions we have coming from different sources. We must be consistent, always, all the time. And the order is very important. Resume must be always after the pause. It cannot be in reverse order. If it happens, if the payment platform says, okay, something goes, first you see resume, then pause, then we need to address that. Upgrade, downgrade, also fine. Cancellation. If the subscription is canceled, we cannot do the upgrade or downgrade. There is no really sense to that. Not really sense to us, to our product and how we see it. So we implicitly said there must be rescind, even though maybe the platform is not telling us that. We want to make sure that everything is according to our model. Or if we go back to the problem when Boris called me, he said, we see an end. How it can be, how we can see just the end. Okay, maybe there is a problem in the platform, right, but we need to handle it. So we implicitly said there must be a start. So look for the information and say, and add a start event. That means, at the end, when we say, okay, we are done with subscriptions, we must always see all the subscriptions in all of these states, and all of the transitions must be consistent. There's just no other way. Let's now see maybe the more bigger picture. Once we are done with subscriptions, how it can help us with the other entities and models we have in our system. We want to see a more broader picture. Subscriptions can tell us about customers. We can clearly and very precisely track customers. One customer can have one or more subscriptions. It's perfectly fine in our world. And group of one or more important customers are part of an enterprise. And that's also very important to us because they're enterprise businesses and we want to take special care of them. On the other hand, there are transactions which are kind of very closely related to subscriptions. They are literally payment, card payments. User comes to the platform, they do a payment. That's something that we call transactions. Combining those subscriptions and transactions, we can have a very clear picture of our products. What are we selling, for what price, and everything else. Boris will tell you more about it later. If we have products, we have revenue. Once we have revenue, we can have very precise information about cash and bookings. And that completes our story about subscriptions. But still, it's not very completed, so from there, we can go to many different other entities and models in our system. But the truth is that once we get subscriptions in place, everything else is very reliable, and we can go from there and make something else. And what's that something else? What value does it bring us? Well, Boris will say us, how does this fit in?
Thanks, Igor. How does it fit in? Well, what Igor just presented to you is great when you are onboarding a data engineer. They have everything there. They exactly know what is the way that system is working, but the actual value of it for the stakeholders isn't there, to be honest. So we need to make something out of it. From this point, I'm taking these entities and working with them to provide stakeholders with something extra. And that something extra will be presented here. First, we have customers. For the customers, we were able to pinpoint exact life cycle of our customers, knowing how they transition between different states, knowing what is the lifetime revenue that we will get from them, and also giving us the insight into what is the expected time when they will churn, making our retention politics much, much better. Then we have the finance. The finance, they wanted to see what is going on with revenue. They wanted to compare the current trends with the ones that occurred last year or last quarter or last fiscal year. We enabled all of that by having exact revenue categorized in exact categories and giving them even the option to create projections of what might occur in future. Then we have our service offerings or our products. This system giving us exact information about what is happening with our products, which products go good with one with another, gave us a clear insight into what should be promoted and what shouldn't be bundled together. But it also gave us an opportunity to try and experiment different types of bundles with our customers. Having that opportunity gave us new revenue streams and gave us new opportunities to even expand our customer base. And finally, on the organization side, as Igor told you, the system was able to connect the customers into entities called enterprises. Taking the user, the customer as it is, and combining it into an enterprise, we were able to create a model that was tracking the customer in the whole life cycle both in respects of itself and in respects of the enterprise. Meaning that we could see when they switched from being a single user for their own into a group which we call an enterprise, and even when they are moving from that group into single user category again. What did that give us as an insight is that we were able to map those transitions into actions performed by our sales team, which enabled this specific clients that we worked for to transition from a B2C model that they were using right now into a B2B model that they were aiming for. So with that said, thank you very much for listening to us, and we're here if you have any questions.
All right, friends, questions from the audience. Please. Alexandra, thank you.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Can I ask what exact technologies did you use?
Yeah, you can, sure. So I already mentioned SQL. So at the beginning, we had purely SQL pipeline. But then when it's about handling those complex situations and scenarios, transitions between states, we decided to use both Python, primarily Python and SQL. So if we're talking about just transformation and just subscriptions, then Python plus SQL.
Thank you.
We want to have a code testable. We want to have much more, let's say, help me there.
Like robust solution that
Yeah.
was able to be used on any platform with any technology. So we aimed for something that is, technically speaking, technology agnostic. So although we did build it with Python and SQL, in our specific case, we used Postgres for a proof of concept, but then moved to Redshift, and it was seamless transition. So we believe that this type of solution can be built, basically speaking, anywhere.
I have one more question.
Please.
Yeah. So you mentioned you were adding events. So when the subscription pauses, you see an upgrade. And in what way did you add them? What timestamps did you use? How did you decide where to add it on the timeline?
Yeah, well, data sources were giving us a lot of different information, and not always they're consistent between those states. So we tried to pick the right information from the data source if it exists. If it doesn't exist, there were also cases where we just cannot do anything. We just implicitly let it happen a second before that event. So that's kind of when we don't have anything else, then we assume it happened last, just to be consistent with the states and transitioning.
Right, thank you very much for your question. Any more questions? I'll take it. All right, who wants a coffee? Pretty much everyone. All right,
Thanks, everyone.
thank you very much, Igor, and thank you very much, Boris. Igor, thank you very much.